Oh boy. I'm going to catch some flack for this one. But I guess some men just want to watch the world burn. Batman Begins had changed the game. Almost overnight, the Batman franchise had been revitalized. A sequel was inevitable, with Warner Bros. Prioritizing development not long after its release, and in spite of Christopher Nolan initially having no plans to continue working on the franchise. Production began in 2006, and we soon got the announcement of our new Joker, Heath Ledger. It's wild to think of it now, but at the time there was a big backlash to this. This was the guy from 10 Things I Hate About You, A Knight's Tale, Brokeback Mountain. He was a romantic lead. There was no way he could play a dangerous psychopath, right? Okay, listen, I'm going to come down hard on The Dark Knight, but I cannot fault Heath Ledger in any way. He is in a much better movie than everybody else, and he is outperforming everyone with every little twitch of his face or lick of his lips. I even posted a casual video prior to this where I discussed my favorite Joker moments. There's a link below if you haven't seen it yet. Unsurprisingly, much of the marketing for this movie was focused on getting people to buy into the idea of Ledger as the Joker. Notably, the Why So Serious ARG created an ever-escalating wave of hype. IGN has a great article that includes an interview with several people behind it. On only a marginally higher budget than its prequel, The Dark Knight opened in New York on July 14th, 2008, and promptly made all the money in the world. But remember how I've said that I don't believe Christopher Nolan really wanted to make a superhero movie? What if I told you can see that lack of drive and effort here? What if I told you that it continues and amplifies the failings from before? What if I told you The Dark Knight is not actually a Batman movie at all? This is part 2 of The Batman Who Wasn't. Welcome to the workshop. My name is Paul, aka Wordmaker. Now, before I get into this, I want to acknowledge Heath Ledger's tragic death just months before The Dark Knight's release. Among the relative minority of us who find faults in this movie, it can be easy to question how his death influenced both audience and critical reaction. I don't want to do that. We can disagree in our views on the movie without abusing the memory of a talented actor whose life was cut short. With that out of the way, let's get to work. As a storyteller, I thrive on watching how an ongoing series can build upon itself, and I believe audiences respond to it as well. This was key to the MCU's success, after all. The Dark Knight represented a unique challenge to Christopher Nolan. He'd never made a sequel before, and he hadn't any real intention of making one. This is new territory for him, and the executives at Warner Bros. Stressed how it had to be bigger and better than Batman Begins. For all my criticisms about Batman Begins, which is still a movie I enjoy, easily my favorite of the trilogy, the credits had rolled on some fantastic fodder for a sequel. The city of Gotham itself had this luscious, heightened reality to it. A bronze sheen covered the streets, with steam rising up from grates, everything feeling just a little damp and both cold and humid at the same time. Nolan took inspiration from Blade Runner for how to create Gotham City, building complete sets for many street scenes, so it would be exciting to see this world expanded further. The slum-like district of the Narrows was left in chaos with Scarecrow and multiple dangerous criminals released from Arkham, so there was scope to explore how the city would recover. People saw Batman gliding through the air looking like a nightmarish monster, which would be the perfect setup for criminals to see him as a boogeyman, maybe even something inhuman. Bruce had been confronted with the idea that Batman could be his true self, so we could have explored how this would affect his own self-perception and his relationships to others. Could he have begun to lose himself in the mission with the single-mindedness we saw? We know the League of Shadows is still out there, with agents throughout Gotham. How will they factor? And we had the tease of the Joker, Batman's ultimate nemesis. But Nolan is at his best when dealing with high-concept once-off ideas like Memento and Inception. Character development and connected storytelling are not his strengths, and it shows here. In a Variety article from the summer of 2008, Nolan is quoted commenting on this very thing. Emma and I had never done a sequel, so for us, the main challenge was to continue the story appropriately and keep it stylistically and tonally consistent. You want to move the story forward and make it somehow larger or more important without losing what worked in the first one. I find this quote sadly ironic. The rich, moody Gotham of Begins is gone. The stylish amber palette, ominous cinematography, and blending of Gothic and Art Deco architecture have been replaced with desaturated tones of blue, medium over-the-shoulder shots, and the buildings are sterile. There's no flavor, nothing to give the city any life. Compare Wayne Tower in the two movies. We go from this statuesque structure watching over the city to this uninspiring slab of black, practically lost against the skyline. But it's even more glaringly obvious when we see the new Batcave. It's not even a cave anymore, but instead a concrete basement underneath a derelict area of docklands, with the most bland overhead lighting and no sense of character. I'd like to point out that Matt Reeves similarly placed Bruce in a penthouse, with his Batcave also being an underground property of Wayne Enterprises. But he still managed to give both settings a unique and alive feel. That movie's Batcave feels like a place, not just a blank room. Whereas Begins was styled after Blade Runner, Nolan has said that The Dark Knight took more inspiration from Michael Mann's Heat. And while the influence is certainly present, I feel like Heat had more grit and grime to give it character. Dark Knight feels like Nolan took Heat, stripped off the paint job, and forgot to apply a new coat. I said it and I meant it. However, it's not just the visual style that's inconsistent or let down. The actual story and plot fail to resonate with the setup of the previous movie. How to approach a sequel depends on whether you're telling broadly episodic stories or an ongoing connected series of adventures. Once you've decided that, you can place your sequel on a spectrum. On one extreme, there's not necessarily any real connection between movies aside from maybe a theme or a few recurring characters. This is where you'll see your Indiana Jones, James Bond, Lethal Weapon. Each movie is its own distinct adventure. You can also get a lot of horror franchises here so that filmmakers can kill off as many characters as possible and keep each new set of protagonists in positions of weakness and fear. On the other end, you have increasing levels of direct connection from the end of one movie to the beginning of the next. We start seeing Star Wars here, the same characters in a series of different adventures, all moving towards the same goal, defeat the Empire. And then increasingly related series like the MCU, all the way to the likes of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, series which are effectively one single story split into parts. This can mix and match across a series, like with the first 3 Matrix movies, or any time a film adaptation of a book series splits the final novel into 2 parts. A well thought out sequel on the connected end of the spectrum should take into account the status quo left at the end of the previous installment. So let's go back to what we discussed when we left off in Batman Begins.
The Narrows is lost.
Okay, but what does that mean? We don't see the Narrows here, and it's not even mentioned. So we have no idea what Gordon meant when he said this. In fact, the only source for the fate of the entire island is from the direct-to-DVD animated anthology, Batman Gotham Knight, which was released just 10 days before the full US release of The Dark Knight. In this, we learn that most of the island has been converted into the new Arkham Asylum. I'm reluctant to consider this part of the canon, since the stories in it are all far beyond the tone of the movies, and according to Wikipedia, even as far as 2020, it had only sold about 373,000 copies. So it's not reasonable to determine that an average viewer would have seen this before seeing The Dark Knight. Besides, it raises some uncomfortable questions about what happened to all the people who lived in the Narrows. Did the city rehouse them, or leave them to fend for themselves? Or did they all just die? So we get no follow-up on the poorest of Gotham's poor. I guess the movie only cares about them in so much as they're props for elites like Bruce Wayne and Harvey Dent. Moving on. We ended Batman Begins with a commitment from Batman to round up Scarecrow and the remaining Arkham inmates. We kinda get this. The second action scene sees Batman recapture Scarecrow, who has gone from citywide terror attacks to dealing drugs from the back of a van. Jeez, how the mighty have fallen. Anyway, this scene does wrap up Scarecrow for now, so I can't come down too harshly in that regard. And it establishes that Batman has been inspiring copycat vigilantes, which might be an interesting plot point later. It won't. It's dropped almost entirely in short order. Wait, did Batman just kill that dog? Let me run that back. Ugh, that is the universally recognized sound for someone killed the dog. Yikes. At least Batman's attitude towards property damage has been consistent. Those aren't the drug dealer's cars, Bruce. I hope the owners have good insurance. Oh, and remember how Ra's al Ghul told Bruce that the League of Shadows had infiltrated every part of Gotham? That never comes up. I guess they all just left town. Bruce certainly never shows any concern that they're still active, despite the fact we have nothing to suggest that any of the League were captured by police. I'm especially disappointed that the sequence of Batman flying over the Narrows led nowhere. The fear toxin making people see him as a demonic monster with glowing red eyes would have been the perfect setup to establish why he's regarded as something supernatural, but none of that is built on or even mentioned. I admit this is all very nitpicky. It's mostly fine. I just feel there was so much focus on these elements last time that it's jarring to see them all dropped so abruptly. Nolan is trying to find balance on the sequel spectrum and leaning into the Joker and how the criminal underworld is responding to Batman. There's only so much that can be fit in, and this movie is already longer than it needs to be. But with the narrative and creative choices he made, he stripped away a lot of what made Batman Begins stand out. And it's time we looked at the biggest victim of this. Okay, as in my previous video, the argument I'm making is that Nolan's take on Batman reflects a problematic and poorly conceived interpretation of the character. And not only are each of my previous points revisited and reinforced here, but The Dark Knight features a singularly special issue, which indicates, in my view, that Nolan was not making the movie he thought he was. First, we're going to look back at Batman's methodology, his no-killing rule, and his desire to keep being Batman, while also needling that grounded reality that Nolan talked about so much. So stick around to see what the new topic is, if you haven't already guessed, and take a minute to drop a like and hit the subscribe button.
Batman's a fascist.
Now we see that Bruce is still taking on organized crime, which is a solid continuation from his initial efforts before the League of Shadows turned up. The problem is that the Joker has been stealing all the money the mob and other gangs store away, leaving behind Batman's marked bills. I actually like this because it establishes Joker's intelligence and means he's been playing cat and mouse with Batman before Batman even considered him a threat. I'd like to have seen more of this, to have the movie really be about these two forces of nature clashing over the fate of Gotham, and Batman having to really reckon with how much he underestimated the Joker. And in Begins, we saw that high-ranking police officers, politicians, even the judge who presided over Joe Chill's parole hearing, all hang out at Falcone's restaurant, regularly enough that Falcone can point them out without hesitation. They don't even blink when Falcone pulls a gun on Bruce. Falcone calls it fear, but the lack of reaction says more. These people aren't afraid. They're corrupt. Gotham is, or should be, based on what we see, rotten to the core. Gordon had been established as pretty much the only good cop on the force, so there ought to be more to Batman's mission than helping the cops try to put mobsters away, because the system is designed to benefit the cops and city officials who keep the mob bosses out of trouble.
I almost had your rookie cold on a racketeering beat.
Don't try and cloud the fact that clearly Maroni's got people in your office, Dent.
How else could Maroni's men get a gun into a courtroom and be willing to try and use it on Dent?
Hostile? I see you hostile.
Well, that's a mistrial right there. Nice work, Harvey. Think about this, though. Rossi gave a sworn statement that Maroni was the new head of Falcone's operations. Both Maroni and Rossi are smug as hell. We have to determine, then, that Rossi hasn't been intimidated into taking the fall after betraying Maroni. No, this was a setup from the moment Rossi gave his statement. It takes some balls to attempt a scheme like this just to get Maroni acquitted and try to assassinate Dent. In fact, I'd argue that Maroni is even more confident in his power than Falcone was. Yes, Falcone had someone shoot Chill at the courthouse just for daring to testify against him. But Maroni actually sent one of his men to give a statement to Harvey Dent and then had the same guy try to kill him right there in the courtroom. Going after a district attorney is a much bigger deal than a small-time prison snitch, especially like this. It's clear to me that taking down one crime boss at a time like this is not going to work in Gotham, and maybe making things worse even without the Joker coming on the scene. But instead of addressing this, we again see the focus on taking out individual bad actors, trusting the legal system to work out if Batman and Jim Gordon just keep at it. Now in part 1, I talked about the way that Bruce gets his equipment from Wayne Tech and how he doesn't really do anything to use his wealth and influence to help Gotham in his civilian identity. preferring instead to use those to assist his mission as Batman. This naturally continues here, and in fact gets amplified. Prior to the events of the movie, Bruce had set up a deal between Wayne Tech and Lau Security Investments Holdings, and it's revealed his objective in doing this was to get a good look at their financial records, because he suspects the CEO of engaging in illegal activities and being financially connected to the Gotham mob. You could argue that crashing his car to save Mr. Reese was something he could only get away with because he's Bruce Wayne, but had it been nice, he would have just done it as Batman. The upshot is that Bruce does not use his influence to directly help Gotham as Bruce Wayne until he holds a fundraising party for Harvey Dent, and even that is because he sees Dent as a means to an end, to stop being Batman, which I'll get into further later. Going back to Lau, the Hong Kong sequence is another example of this Batman's haphazard methodology. Lau has fled the US because he knows the police are getting ready to make a move against him. Bruce needs to get into Hong Kong, grab Lau, and they get back to Gotham. His plan is to be picked up by a skyhook, and to crew the plane he hires South Korean smugglers. Okay. As his alibi to explain his absence from Gotham, Bruce runs off with the Russian ballet. Like, all of them. The ship used for this scene is called the Royal Albatross. It's a barkentine which has a crew of 12. That's a lot of people to see Bruce get picked up in a seaplane and then not come back. And then, after attracting all this attention, he walks around Hong Kong as Bruce Wayne without so much as a disguise. But that's just the warm-up. Here is where things get really ridiculous. Gotham is generally accepted as being located in New Jersey, which takes a commercial jet with a cruising speed of 800 kilometers an hour between 16 and 17 hours to reach from Hong Kong. The plane Bruce uses is a Lockheed L-100 Hercules with a cruising speed of about 540 kilometers an hour. It also has a maximum range of 2,470 kilometers. And it is over 13,000 kilometers from Hong Kong to New Jersey. So not only will the total flight time be closer to 25 hours, the plane will have to stop multiple times along the way to refuel. I hope Bruce has a way to pee in that suit. So the South Korean smugglers collect Bruce Wayne from his yacht, airdrop him into Hong Kong, and then pick up Batman and take him back to Gotham. Either these are some damn trustworthy smugglers, or they have the object permanence of an infant playing peekaboo. This all goes back to my issues with trying to make things as realistic as possible. The more you stress the importance of realism as a storyteller, the bigger the risk of it not making sense. It smacks of trying too hard, and it is a gamble to tout the realism of a story as a result. All in all, if I were to cut one specific thing from The Dark Knight, it would be the entire Hong Kong sequence. Its logic has the durability of cardboard, and it is unjustifiably long considering it only serves to get Lau into police custody and establish Fox's sonar technology. It wouldn't take much of a rewrite to accomplish the first, and there is nothing about Lau's capture that depends on the sonar, since he's just out in the open. It's a very long sequence just to shoehorn in a gadget that will play a role in the movie's climax, which has its own issues. But more later. In any case, the point was to get Lau into police custody, and as he handles the money for every criminal faction in the city, this means Gordon and Dent can take down the entire Gotham underworld.
Charge them with what?
In a RICO case, if you can charge one of the conspirators with a felony, you can charge
all of them with it. That's great.
I get that Jonathan and Christopher Nolan needed a way to explain Dent's plan to the audience, but did they have to do it by having Jim Gordon, the head of the Major Crimes Unit, not know how a RICO case works? I didn't raise this as a point in part one because there was really nothing for Batman to solve in Batman Begins. While there's a mystery about what Scarecrow's up to and a little sleuthing here and there, most of the time he comes across the information he needs fairly easily, or people just outright tell him what he needs to know. But I think this is a good topic to zero in on as part of Batman's methodology. The Dark Knight does present some opportunity for Batman to do some traditional detective work while trying to identify and track down the Joker. So we see him running facial recognition, comparing ballistics, using sci-fi imaging tech to reconstruct a fingerprint, grounded in reality, which is all pretty cool. Unfortunately, the actual detective work stops after Commissioner Loeb's funeral and the fake-out death of Jim Gordon. Alright, as an aside, it's odd to include the scene where Bruce and Alfred are destroying evidence in the Bat basement, with Bruce all set to turn himself in. It's not that I don't buy Bruce making such a decision. He's all about giving up being Batman in this one. It's just that it's given this heavy weight that feels unearned and far too final for a scene halfway through the movie. This is Dark Knight of the Soul stuff, not an Act 2 midpoint complication. It's also completely undercut in the next scene when Dent announces that he's Batman. I get that Nolan wanted to pull a plot twist here, but I'm not sure he sells the idea that Bruce is actually gonna reveal his identity. And the surprise of Dent claiming to be Batman would work just as well, if maybe even better, if it came out of nowhere. Getting back to the detective work, there is a common criticism in a lot of Batman stories that since he's meant to be the world's greatest detective, a writer needs to be able to come up with a really good mystery to demonstrate this. The problem is, writing mysteries is hard. Writing good mysteries is really hard. Writing a mystery that only the world's greatest detective can solve? That's something only a handful of writers can do. We're talking your Agatha Christie's here. And comic book writers are typically not mystery writers. So a lot of the time they will resort to having Batman beat or intimidate the information he needs out of people. In many ways, Batman is more famous for being scary than for being intelligent. Remember that clip from Blue Beetle?
Batman's a fascist.
This sort of thing is where that comes from. That and the fact he's basically a cop. Seriously though, an awful lot of writers resort to Batman just violating people's rights instead of piecing together clues like Sherlock Holmes. It's nothing new to the character, but like the use of his company's technology I mentioned in part 1, Christopher Nolan takes this to a whole new level.
You've turned every cell phone in Gotham into a microphone.
And a high-frequency generator receiver.
Government surveillance and the right to privacy was a hot issue when The Dark Knight was released. With the passing of the Patriot Act in 2001, the US government gained a slew of powers to monitor its citizens, and to this day, it's considered an extremely controversial law. The movie's dialogue pulls from war on terror ideas, with the Joker specifically being called a terrorist. Even the movie poster leans heavily into 9/11 imagery. So it's really problematic that Bruce expands on Fox's sonar technology and builds a machine that can track the whereabouts of every person in Gotham and listen to everything they say and see everything they do. That's horrible. But this is justified by the narrative, since we're asked to buy into the idea that the Joker is so dangerous that the ends justify the means, and this is the only way to find him. And during Batman's monologue at the end, the shot of Lucius destroying the machine is paired with the lines about faith being rewarded.
Sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded.
We're being told, not so subtly, that the right person, the good elite, can be trusted with unlimited power because they will only ever use it for good, and they will give it up as soon as they no longer need it. Now, if you buy that, I have two people for you to meet. One's called Caesar, one's called Palpatine. More on Caesar later. Today, this is an even more contentious issue, as we see the effects of the elite having unfettered control playing out with Donald Trump and the rest of his fascist henchmen like Elon Musk and Stephen Miller.
Editing Wordmaker here. I recorded this before Trump and Musk had their big falling out, but the damage Musk did remains, and things have only gotten worse with the Trump administration continuing to wield ICE as a secret police and escalating violence at largely peaceful protests such as those in LA and during the No Kings rallies.
In the same Variety article from 2008 that I mentioned before, Nolan is quoted as saying, "We try not to be particularly conscious of what we're doing. We try to write the story within this world and these characters, and in the process, try to do something that affects us and the world we live in. When we look back at the finished product, we see various parallels and relevancies, but we try and just let that be a product of writing what moves us, what frightens us and excites us. We trust that that will have some reality or some relevance, but it would violate the terms of storytelling and the terms of the genre if you're too conscious of trying to make particular political points. I don't think that's what you're selling the audience. I don't think that's what the ride is. I think ultimately, if the film has relevance, it's actually going to be more interesting to an audience, but we like it to be subtext." I find this troubling, to be honest. As a writer myself, I'm all too aware of how personal biases will creep into your work. So if you're not conscious of the societal and political implications, you can end up saying something that you didn't intend, and that can have dangerous consequences. What we can take from this corresponds to the great man theory, that only exceptional individuals can influence history. Batman is one of these so-called great men, and intentionally or not, Nolan is telling us that what we need for things to be better is to put power in the hands of the elite and trust them to do what's right instead of holding them accountable for their actions. The other major use of the sonar is when the SWAT teams are moving in. It gives Batman the upper hand in tackling the cops and the Joker's men, and in saving the real hostages. But even though the movie came out a year before the Arkham Asylum video game, This is just an uglier version of detective vision that distracts from what we should be focusing on. You see, the emotional weight of this scene, what the scene is all about, should be Batman turning on the cops, deciding that protecting innocent people matters more than abiding by a system that will never be just. The specific gadgets used are irrelevant. This could have been the moment when Bruce realizes that Batman will always be needed, because the system cannot be trusted to do what's right instead of what's convenient.
Stand down, you really...
This would also have given some purpose to the heroically swelling musical score. This scene could really have meant something. In general, I don't have an issue with superheroes who kill. It doesn't make sense for someone like Wolverine or Deadpool to avoid it, and when done well, a good writer can put some weight to a hero killing someone accidentally or being pushed to their breaking point. I'm not even sure I have a problem with Superman killing a particularly powerful foe, as long as it's given the gravity and sincerity it deserves. Not like that, basically. But Batman's different. Despite his more ruthless Golden Age origins, Batman's code against killing has become one of the cornerstones of his character, at least in comics and most animated adaptations. And I think the moral and ethical questions that this code brings up are worthy of discussion and exploration. Which is why I just don't get what Nolan's doing with it. It's never explicitly stated, only brought up in indirect references to his one rule, but we're meant to understand that this Batman does not kill.
But I don't have to save you.
Bruce may not like doing the job himself, but he's not above putting lives at risk or getting creative with his definition of kill.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
I'll get this one out of the way first because it's practically a meme at this point, but there are comfortably 200 or 300 people at that party. Probably more. I didn't do a shot-by-shot head count.
The Joker shows up, Heath Ledger steals the scene, and ends up throwing Rachel out a window.
And they're dead. The rest of the movie is a fever dream as Bruce's synapses fire for the last time before his brain shuts down. Joking aside, while we see Batman try to get his cape into gliding mode, he and Rachel never visibly slow down. They keep falling at the same speed and absolutely crush the hood of that cab, but neither one has so much as a scratch. I know this is a small detail, but it shows the lack of care from the director. But I guess it does give new meaning to grounded reality. True to form for this Batman, once Rachel is safe, he doesn't care about anybody else.
Is Harvey okay?
Safe.
How do you know that, Bruce? You're lying to her, Bruce. Sure, Batman knocked down the masked goons, but the Joker's still up there, and we don't know how soon his men are going to get back up. We don't see any of them being questioned by the cops after this, so they probably got away. Hundreds of people are in danger, and the only thing protecting Dent is the fact that he's hidden in a conspicuously barricaded pantry that's in the same open room as the Joker. And Nolan just drops the whole scene. He has a real problem with only wanting us to care about named characters. The next big action set piece is the truck chase, with the Joker trying to kill Dent. And if we thought the tumbler chase from Begins was rough, we had no idea what we were in for here. There is so little regard for people's safety in this whole thing, and it doesn't help matters that the cops are completely inept. Take this moment, just your everyday, run-of-the-mill, burning fire truck. This is kind of funny though. It's literally a fire truck. Okay, the route to the county jail is blocked and they have to detour. But what's stopping them crossing over to the opposite lane and getting back on track further along the street? Or going over the curb and around the left of the truck? There's enough space to get through. Gotham PD takes traffic laws very seriously. This puts the convoy on the lower street level, where they have no air support and no police blockades keeping things clear. And there are civilians. Time for the bodies to start racking up. This guy comes to a relatively safe stop, so while he's out of the chase, he gets off easily. Same with this guy, he's okay. We don't get a really good look at the SWAT truck interior, but earlier when the team was prepping for the convoy, we saw 9 officers. Though in this shot, we actually see 5 officers along one side, so I'm going to raise my estimate to 11 total if we assume an even number of officers on each side of the truck with the driver. I could be wrong, but I've seen conflicting reports on various fan wikis, and I'm comfortable with this number. That truck is going to sink fast, and those guys are strapped with some heavy gear. I'm saying none of them get out. I want to count these as these vehicles are moving at high speed and the damage is pretty severe. That's our first civilian death. Notably, each of the patrol cars appears to have just one officer in them, each on his own, so these count as one apiece. So about that no killing thing, Bruce. I guess vehicular manslaughter doesn't count? Batman takes a hit from the rocket launcher to save the truck carrying Dent, and the tumbler is wrecked.
Harvey Dent. Oh, excuse me, I want to drive.
It looks like the driver here was killed by shrapnel from the tumbler getting hit, so that's on the Joker. Luckily, no one is hurt by this, but Batman couldn't have known for sure that the self-destruct wouldn't injure somebody. No one's getting hurt, but... Holy shit, Batman! There is no way he saw those kids, and the debris from those explosions could easily have landed on them if that car had flipped a different way. Besides which, it looks like there's enough room on that sidewalk for the Batpod to clear the street without blasting through people's cars. Again, I hope the people of Gotham have good insurance. Thankfully, the wreckage doesn't hit anybody. And Batman just firing machine guns into a mall. You're wearing body armor. You don't need to risk a mass shooting to go through a glass door. He really likes blowing up stuff and just hoping nobody's too close when he does. Now, one of the Joker's men got into the truck cab with him earlier, but we don't see him climb out after this. So that's 2 kills for Batman. I was going to count the 2 men who were still in the truck trailer, but when rewatching to get the count, I saw them climbing out here. It's hard to see just how many people are in these cars or how many are hit, but given the streets are relatively quiet, I'll say 1 person in each, and only 2 of the cars go out of control, so that's 2 more civilians to the tally. Batman loses the game of chicken, swerving to avoid the Joker at the last minute and crashing the Batpod. Why, Bruce? You've already killed 2 people and endangered dozens of others. Following this, Dent is hailed as a hero, but though he says the cops are the real heroes, he never mentions the ones who lost their lives. Side note, I love this reporter just holding his microphone out to the car that's driving away. Look at him. He even speaks into the mic as the car leaves, then holds it back out as if he's going to get a response. There's a celebratory air with lots of clapping and shaking hands. No one seems to consider that Dent's stunt to draw out the Joker cost the lives of 14 cops and at least 3 civilians. And I'm not sure how Gordon faking his death fits into this. He says it was to keep his family safe, but Gordon wasn't even on the Joker's radar. He could have slipped into Dent's transport detail without traumatizing his family beforehand. Gordon is a bad husband and a bad father. The way people talk suggests he had some kind of plan in place, but we have no evidence to suggest that he, Dent, and Batman were coordinating in any way. Did Gordon expect to have a chance to get shot during the funeral? If so, he probably had on some kind of body armor under his clothes. But does that mean other cops were in on it, like Stevens here? What about the paramedics who arrived on the scene? And he couldn't let his wife and kids know? If he wasn't planning on getting himself shot, he wouldn't have been wearing Kevlar or anything, so he took a rifle around in the back and just lay there thinking, I can make this work. And neither Bruce nor Dent knew he was alive, so was Gordon just hiding out at police headquarters, hoping to get an opportunity to swoop in? Bruce is damn lucky he did, though, because the Joker had him here. Yep, Batman ate shit in the street for no reason and was as good as dead until Gordon stepped in. This wasn't a coordinated effort or a master plan. It all just came about on its own. An absolute mess that worked out because everyone involved just happened to be playing the same game. As a rule, coincidences should never make things better for the heroes. Rather, they should complicate matters and create problems. Convenience is the enemy of drama. Alright, I lied when I said I don't know how the fake-out death fits. It does fit, but in a Doyleist sense, not a Watsonian one. If you haven't heard these terms before, they refer to how we interpret a text and come from the analysis of Arthur Conan Doyle's work. Watson is the in-book narrator, so a Watsonian explanation is from the perspective of those within the story, while a Doyleist explanation reflects the perspective of the author. A quick example would be, why was the killer's handkerchief found at the scene of the crime? The Watsonian answer is, because he dropped it. The Doyleist answer is, because the detective needs a clue to follow. There is no good Watsonian explanation for Gordon faking his death. He and his family were never in any danger. He only got shot because it took a bullet for the mayor, and the Joker had pointedly not targeted the family members or loved ones of any of his victims before this. The Doyleist explanation is, Nolan wanted a sad story beat and a surprise reveal. That's it. He wanted to play on audience emotions and give a motivation for Bruce to turn himself in, and then for Dent to try and take the fall instead. The problem is, the marketing for this movie was one of the biggest in history. To this day, I'd say there have been few to match it, if any have. It's almost a guarantee that everyone in any given theater had seen the trailer where the Joker sneers,
Evening, Commissioner.
the trailer which showed Gordon discussing the Joker after he's in custody.
Nothing in his pockets but knives and lint.
So this took me out of the movie completely, and I don't think I ever really got back into it. Now I had to sit through these overwrought scenes of deep despair and sadness, which were completely unearned because I knew this was a fake out. Weirdly, after the Joker escapes with Lau and his bombs leave Rachel dead and Harvey horribly burned, Batman gets careful again. Even after Joker blows up a hospital and threatens the entire city, the Batman who previously crashed a train into a building starts deploying measured, non-lethal methods. He takes pains to set up ways to neutralize the SWAT teams and keep the hostages safe, and while he's quite brutal with the Joker's men, nothing appears to be fatal. Although it stands out to me that he does nothing whatsoever to help the people on the ferries, neither does anyone else. Although Gordon is at least taking it seriously, but there's not even an attempt to communicate with them and let them know Batman and the police are about to tackle the Joker and save them. I know, realistically, there isn't much that can be done to get them off the boats, but with the cell phone sonar working on the ferries, that means the passengers' phones must still have signal. Maybe try to call somebody? Batman, for his part, blindly trusts that the hundreds of people on the ferries will either have the collective decency to die together or faith that someone will stop the Joker. He's proven right, of course. It's just so emotionally flat. Why should we be concerned about the choice on the ferries if Batman isn't? In their final confrontation, Joker takes on Batman with the help of some... Oh no. I get it, okay? It makes sense to use dogs against Batman, and it's a life or death situation. It doesn't sit well with me that Nolan included 2 scenes where Batman brutalized dogs and kill at least 3. That was a creative choice made in the writing and the directing. No chance of a tranquilizer dart or something? Anyway, the Joker beats Batman thanks to the dogs and disruption to his sonar, and he pins him down. Now, with moments to go before the ferry's deadline, Batman waits and actually plays the Joker's game, betting that the people on each ferry will choose not to use their detonator. It's only after the deadline, while the Joker has his own detonator in his hands, that he fires his wrist blades and flips the Joker over the edge. He then saves the Joker, which the Clown Prince of Crime interprets as Batman proving how unyielding his moral code is.
You truly are incorruptible, aren't you? Huh?
But if we remember that Batman has killed 2 people already and endangered several others, and take into account how long he waited before disabling the Joker, this reads less as having a moral stance against killing, and more like he wants to beat the Joker at his own game and have a chance to gloat. Of course, when you play by the Joker's rules, you will lose every time.
You need an ace in the hole. Mine's Harvey.
The Joker completely broke Harvey Dent, making him fully embrace his Two-Face persona and sending him on a killing spree. His last victims are Gordon and his family. In a relatively subdued showdown, Batman tries to save Gordon's son. Still armed with an array of weapons and gadgets, and with Harvey thinking that he's out of the picture since he's been shot, he opts for a clumsy body tackle, sending himself and Two-Face plummeting. For all the skill and finesse he displayed in taking the Joker alive, Bruce shows no such care when it comes to Dent. Was it an accident? Did he think he could try and save Gordon's son without killing Dent, only to fail? Or maybe he knew the only way to save Dent's reputation and keep the mob bosses from walking free was to kill Dent and take the blame for his crimes? Or did he decide it was a mercy to kill Dent rather than leave him like this? Any of these would have been an interesting emotional angle. But the movie isn't really interested in exploring that. The only weight given here is what this means for Gotham and the cases Dent was leading against the mob. His reputation is already lost, so his life doesn't appear to have much worth in terms of what the movie and the characters show us. I said in part 1 that Bruce's code is one of self-righteousness rather than coming from a place of morality. This is exemplified here. He's fine with any death he can write off as accidental, but he draws the line at undeniable murder, especially if he can make a point in the process.
I have one rule.
No, you really don't. In its epilogue, Batman begins introduced to the idea that Bruce Wayne is the real mask, while Batman is the true persona. I argue that the movies as seen disprove this, but admitted that there wasn't so much of this in Begins. It's here, in The Dark Knight, that we really see how Bruce views Batman. We know it hasn't been all that long since Batman Begins. Wayne Manor hasn't been fully rebuilt yet, and the Joker comments on how things are different from a year ago. A good number of sources and commentaries I found generally agree that there's about a 10-month gap between the two movies, so this all fits. So after less than a year, Bruce believes that a city which was so lost that the League of Shadows was ready to plunge it into chaos and death is all but saved. Or at least saved enough to the point where one good district attorney is all it needs to get it the rest of the way. That is an impressive turnaround time. Most cities can't even get a handle on workplace safety standards that fast. As we see, Gotham is just as corrupt as ever. Batman is hurting the mob's bottom line, sure, but there are still enough dirty cops and people on the take in Dent's office that Lau is able to plan a massive movement of funds and get himself to Hong Kong long before Gordon and Dent can make a move on him. The movie reinforces the fact that the system is either unable or unwilling to stop criminals like Maroni, but Bruce thinks Dent can fix it. He sees Dent as a way out.
He locked up half of the city's criminals, and he did it without wearing a mask. Gotham needs a hero with a face.
10 months into the game, and Bruce is looking for a replacement. Not unreasonable, being Batman would be a miserable way to live, no matter what online fanboys will tell you. But as I said in part 1, pretty much every version of Batman is compelled to put on the cape and cowl night after night. Whether it's because there are threats and villains only Batman can contend with, whether that's some dark compulsion that pushes him to keep putting on the suit, or because any attempt to retire inevitably ends in tragedy, Bruce Wayne can never stop being Batman. And it's the job of the storyteller to craft a narrative in which that holds true. It's the restaurant scene where Bruce makes the final decision to trust Dent. We get this slow push in on him as Dent talks, with his expression showing that Dent is really reaching him. This scene is usually remembered for Dent's line.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
But what's always overlooked is that this is a flippant rebuff to Rachel's remark about Caesar, which was a response to Dent's argument that when things get so bad, when there are enemies at the gate, it's appropriate and natural for a single person to be allowed to rise up and take unilateral action. This line is not some profound statement on morality and the nature of heroism, but a cynical dismissal of genuine criticisms about dictators.
When their enemies were at the gates, the Romans would suspend democracy and appoint one man to protect the city.
Harvey, the last man that they appointed to protect the Republic was named Caesar, and he never gave up his power.
And it's interesting that Dent specifically points to ancient Rome to support his argument in favor of the Batman, since fascism has its origins in the romanticizing of the Roman Empire, which Mussolini used in his rise to power. Dent is directly calling back to fascist ideology. The thing about dictators is that they always manipulate or ignore the systems of government that are supposed to hold them in check. Harvey Dent is no different. For all his bravado about chance and fairness, he reveals that his lucky coin has two heads. He manipulates a system he pretends to abide by in order to make him appear just, fair, and trustworthy, while ensuring he gets the outcome he desires. And this is the man that Bruce wants to hand Gotham over to. Yes, the two-headed Liberty coin comes from the comics and is used in basically every adaptation of the character, but it's still valid to analyze what it says about him. In her letter, Rachel says she's marrying Dent because she doesn't believe there will ever be a day when Bruce doesn't need Batman. And I'm not sure where she's getting this from, or what we as the audience are supposed to interpret as the justification. The only thing I can connect it to is her anger that Bruce didn't do anything after Dent said he was Batman. But earlier she had objected to Bruce turning himself in, pointing out that if he did, they'd never be able to be together, so which is it? I want to say she no longer had any romantic feelings for Bruce and was just trying to let him down easy. She certainly looks uncomfortable every time he brings it up, but this really feels like weak and inconsistent characterization, since there is nothing to suggest that Bruce sees anything other than a means to an end, one which he fully believes to be within reach in the immediate future. Compare this, instead, to a similar story beat from the DC AU's Mask of the Phantasm. While not quite a case of Bruce trying to give up being Batman, because he hasn't become Batman yet, he's still tempted to abandon the vow he made to his parents. The key difference is how conflicted Bruce is over this.
I know I made a promise, but I didn't see this coming. I didn't count on being happy.
That one line carries more depth and pathos than every scene of Christian Bale across all three of Nolan's movies. And we see the strings of fate pulling, from the ominous warning of the bats emerging when Bruce proposes to Andrea, to the birth of the Dark Knight himself. In most superhero stories, the reveal of the hero donning their costume for the first time is a moment of triumph. But there is nothing triumphant here. In this story, being Batman is a tragedy, a duty assigned almost as a punishment.
My God.
He is Batman for all time, until he has literally worn his body down to the point where, in a moment of desperation, he almost crosses the one line he swore he wouldn't.
Never again.
That's how you handle this kind of character arc. I mean, this is a Bruce Wayne who is so done with being Batman that he openly discusses his vigilante activities while catering staff are in the same room.
And why do you think I want to hold a party for Harvey Dent?
Well, I assumed it was your usual reason for socialising beyond myself and the scum of Gotham's underbelly.
And here we are. I opened part 2 with this. Yeah, The Dark Knight is a movie with Batman in it, but Batman is not the protagonist. Really, Batman is barely a character at all. He is basically a salon prop in his first meeting with Dent, and his motivation, as I've discussed, boils down to, I've done what I can, it's time to quit and find someone else to finish the job. For all the focus there was on Bruce's journey in Batman Begins, the shift here is quite stark. None of Bruce's actions that influence the plot are based on his own agency and decision-making, not up until he turns on the cops to stop them shooting the hostages. Even pursuing Lau is something he does at Dent's urging. We do get the suggestion from Alfred that Bruce is partly responsible for the emergence of someone like the Joker and any future villains who may appear, which is backed up by the Joker himself. And the story about burning the forest down suggests an emotional arc for Bruce having to sacrifice something to stop the Joker. But there's no payoff because even though he crosses a moral and ethical line with the sonar device, this is both framed as justified because of the danger the Joker represents, and consequence-free because the machine is destroyed, so Bruce's relationship to Fox, the only source of objection to it, is spared. Bruce doesn't even seem to have any anger towards the Joker after Rachel dies. Consider he didn't show any concern over endangering lives to save her in the previous movie, and how desperate he was to reach her following the Joker's interrogation. He's at his least emotional for the entire final act, when he should be his most engaged. The closest we get to actual character development is when Bruce takes the blame for the murders Two-Face committed. He lets himself become an enemy of the system, to be hunted until Gotham is ready to accept him. Sure hope that doesn't get dropped like every other arc in this series. So who is this movie about? Easy. This guy. This movie is the tragedy of Harvey Dent, a man who served a system he believed was just, who put his trust in a vigilante and pursued order beyond all else, only to lose everything at the hands of an agent of chaos, and to be twisted into a dark mockery of his former self. Dent is at the heart of every twist and turn, every story beat. While the crooks of Gotham are learning to accept Batman as part of life and trying to adapt to him, they're outright trying to kill Dent.
Hostile? I see you hostile!
The Joker claims the mob wanted him to put a stop to Batman, but killing Batman was the Joker's idea, not theirs.
It's simple. We kill the Batman.
And even that was just a part of his larger plans. He doesn't actually want Batman dead. It's Dent who wants to meet and work with Batman. Dent who, admittedly indirectly, suggests that Batman get allowed back to Gotham. Dent is the one to come up with the RICO plan, which leads to the arrest of every criminal leader in the city. And it's Dent who is given a true character arc and personal journey, as bit by bit he sacrifices his adherence to due process and the rule of law. Until the end, he is left behind justice in favor of revenge. In a 2008 interview with Slash Film, Christopher Nolan said that Harvey Dent was meant to form the emotional arc of the movie. Does he achieve that? For me, the answer is no. Even the least comic-savvy audience member would likely remember Tommy Lee Jones's Two-Face in Batman Forever. And between trailer shots showing Dent lying on his face soaked in gasoline and leaked images of him following his disfigurement, it was clear we were going to see Dent transformed into Two-Face here. So what we needed from this movie was more of a Shakespearean tragedy than a Michael Mann crime thriller. We needed Aaron Eckhart to be more of a co-lead to Christian Bale and develop a relationship between Dent and Bruce so that Dent's fall has a personal stake, not just the universal stakes of his work as the district attorney. And of course, even with all that, it would have been impossible for that storyline to hold a candle to the Joker. Eckhart's a good actor, no doubt, but like everyone else, he is completely overshadowed by Heath Ledger. Aside from that, it's a disservice to the characters to try and leverage the first clash between Batman and his greatest foe against what could have been a thoughtful, tragic story showcasing Dent's fall. In the end, the movie is pulling in too many different directions on an emotional level, leaving Dent's storyline painfully shallow and rushed. As the curtain closes on Harvey Dent and Jim Gordon explains the themes of the film to us to make sure that we really understand it, because seriously, who else is that speech for? It's definitely not for his 10-year-old kid. Batman rides off into the night. And next time, we'll see how things change for him, now that he has to contend with the police hunting him, while also fighting the increasing number of supervillains that we've been promised will emerge in response to his actions, right? Right? Thanks for watching. I'm really sorry this one took so long. I had a lot to say, and it ended up much longer than anything else I've done before. So if you've made it this far without clicking away in disgust, I really appreciate it. Please do like and share and subscribe if you want to support me doing this and help me make more of these at a better rate. Any help you can offer at Patreon, if you can manage that, would be really appreciated. So I'm going to try and get part 3 up much faster than this one. So for now, remember, back up your arguments, cite your sources, take care, and I'll see you next time.